Let's start the first meetup.
All right.
You want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Yes. All right. So, So my name is Miguel Quintero. I am a senior API designer with Delta Airlines. I've been with Delta for 2 years, and in IT, 27 years. Basically, mostly back-end work, a little bit of UI work. And then I discovered APIs as I got more into DevOps, right? That space about almost 6 years ago. In your DevOps space, you're connecting things, building pipelines and connecting all kinds of things, and automation. And so easy way to do that through, hey, you start asking the questions: does this thing have an API? Does this have an API? And then you start getting into deeper into the subject, and so that's fairly interesting, and I haven't looked back since. So I kind of enjoy that work. And with me is Ankur Marfatia. So it's interesting. So he leads the developers best practice at the Delta, a big DevOps guy at work. And we sort of go back and forth a lot on hopefully I'm trying to get teams to develop APIs better, easy, more consistent. And he's doing best practices, and sort of like we have efforts together to get APIOps going, or at least this notion of APIOps going at Delta, right? I think there's a little bit of that pockets, I would say. We have some modest gains, but we have a lot of work to do. Maybe you could say a little bit about yourself.
I think so. You covered it very well.
Okay.
So I'm a DevOps enthusiast here at Delta, and I'm trying to get the culture going at Delta for DevOps. Not just the CI/CD pipeline, but just the no-blame culture where people can collaborate and work together so that we can produce whatever we produce at a high quality.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of guests here. So you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Yan. I'm a DevOps at Miami Associates, and we have a supply chain as well, and we host our customers on AWS, and now we are moving to GCP. So we utilize API a lot in our work, and I'm interested in seeing how you guys authenticate and protect the APIs from hostile users.
Oh, okay, cool. So the security part of it.
Yeah.
All right.
Valerie, right?
Yes. I'm Valerie, and I'm currently a teaching assistant at Lambda School. I'm looking for work in the data science field, and I have very limited experience with APIs, and so I'd like the opportunity to get to know more about how to use APIs.
Cool. Welcome to the first session. So I'll hand it over to Miguel. Miguel is the expert in APIs, so he's going to lead the session today.
So basically we're making history. I'm going to go and explain what APIOps is, but we are basically the first APIOps. So we remember the APIOps is a community of API practitioners in this space, both dev of the APIOps and APIs. And about almost 3 years ago, I've been following them. They started out Helsinki, up in Finland, they're all in Europe, right? And mainly that part of the world, and just basically paying attention to that community. And I said, okay, maybe we could start one here. And so, I created went into meetup.com, created the meetup, and then welcome, please have a seat. We're still in time. We just got started. Maybe you wanna. We're recording this. Want to introduce yourself?
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Leon Hayford. I'm a senior software engineer in Delta. I'm working for Digital Ops.
Oh, cool. Are you going to be what's
Aaron's friend.
Aaron's friend, yeah. Yep. So tell him I forgot his name.
You are
already recorded, yeah. I know. So yeah, obviously, So basically, so I was watching the community. I like what they did, and I said, okay, you know what? Let me. I'm passionate about APIs, about this particular subject, and said let's get used to learn how to grow a community. That was 3 years ago. Biggest challenge is, of course, finding space, etc. And I've been, switching jobs and careers and all that. Well, here we go. So here we are, and we technically we're the first APIOPS meetup in the Americas. In the Americas, there's another one in Dallas. But we're the first, and this is our first meetup. Yay. So you guys are definitely cutting edge, and definitely making some product strides. So what is APIOPS? So, and I'll show you the website. APIOPS is a global network of APIOPS communities, a new breed of DevOps to support lean, business-oriented, and developer-friendly APIs. APIOPS is about automation of any step of the API lifecycle. So whether it's design, even onboarding, it is not just development, right? But securing, onboarding, development, testing, you name it. Right? So that's what, from a DevOps perspective, how to build API. Let me. We will basically we will try to do monthly meetups. The next one's in January. I'll post it out at meetup.com, and anyone can present the 5x5 RESTfest format. So for those of you who don't know, RESTfest is a conference. It's a very small conference. They have 2 or 3 a year. It's very small and very 30 or 40 people or so. And what I like about that is very personal. It's not like one of these big conferences where you barely have time to talk to people and you have to run from session to session to session to session. And it's one of those. What's unique about this is that if you go, you have to present. If you go, you have to present, and that's where they have. Of course, there's a keynote, right? They pick the keynote speaker, but then there's workshops. And my favorite format is the 5x5 RESTfest format, which is basically 5 minutes, 5 slides, 5 minutes. And they go even further. They can do, you can pretty much talk about whatever you like. That's how laid back it is. It's not just, they're kind of like they call themselves the unconference because it's not just about REST. They're not like Restafarians where they're like strictly REST and academically speaking, you said yes, are RESTful or they're not because they don't follow the 6 constraints and so on and so forth. You could literally get on in front of the crowd and say, look, this is how you make my favorite cupcakes. And off you go. 5 minutes, 5 slides, 5 minutes. Most of the time, it's really techie topics, but you're open to talk about anything you want. And so what I plan to do is join forces with other meetups. Say, I was looking around. I'm not sure. Maybe there's I make like a GraphQL or any other sort of meetups, and just join and maybe have come and talk and describe what they're working on. So, but for next time, I think what will make this APIOPS. And I've noticed that's what they do, more or less what they have. They follow the meetup model, which is there's a fixed topic for the day, and that's what they have. I like to expand on that. I like to say, well, the invite says topic A, B, C, but you know what? You can come in the meetup and say, look, I want to talk about whatever. You can go ahead and do that.
It's open space.
Yeah, it's open space. Come here and then 5 minutes of whatever you like, data or security APIs or et cetera, we'll open for that. Let me show you real quick here. Go up to let me see here. I'll show you what I'm talking about. go. So this is basically, this website is very informative, and they have, let's see, let me sign in and I'll talk about. Oh, security. Wait for my code. All right, Google, send me the OAuth code. Oh, no wonder I'm in airplane mode. How did that happen? All right. So we send it. There we go. So I will do, let's try this one. All right, so here are all the meetups, like I was showing you. So we have, these are all in like Finland, right? So we have Helsinki, Tampere. So 3 years ago, it was just these two, and I was going back and forth and looking at what they're up to. And I mean, there were good presentations. Then here we are. And this lady here, Marjuka, I met her. I was in API Days Paris last week. And she's a community manager. And I finally got to meet her, and she was giving me some hints and some tips and basically how to run. She's been running the 2 meetups over there. And she was kind of worried that we weren't active. So I said, okay, I promised her we'll get going. So here we are, right? And I want to thank you, Encore, and Shabana as well for helping out. I mean, it's a big deal. Finding the right place is probably the first step. So, like I said, you guys are definitely making history. So, anyway, so that's the community's website. It's really good. It's got the recordings and sessions for these other meetups. And in particular, I want to cover, not now, but talk about probably in their next business, talk about the APIOps lifecycle method for lean API development. I think this is fairly interesting. And maybe we'll probably give a demo or go through different steps. They even have an audit of this life cycle as well. You know, take an API, and there's a series of checklist items that you could go through. So anyway, I'll put this on the meetup.com, and you guys can folks can take a look. Let me see, I'll post. Yeah. So again, you know, they touch on low code, no code. That's something that's coming up actually. How to build APIs and so on and so forth, regulations, and I mean, you name it. I mean, APIs touch a lot of space. So anyway, that's APIOps. I want to move on to any questions, APIOps? Any seems like a straightforward. Okay, cool. All right. So let's talk. I want to talk about. Here we go. So API Days, yeah. So API Days, and I'll show you guys the website in a minute. But yeah, so I was there last. Actually, I was there as a participant, as a customer. the one in Barcelona, which is in September. And again, this is the largest API community conference by far, and they're also network. So besides basically it's the sum of all of those conferences put together. So we're talking thousands of people. So maybe last week, maybe 500-600 folks showed up. The one before Barcelona was a little bit smaller. It's the first time they've done it there. So, but and they have different themes for conference. So for the one in September was around coincidentally was around the transportation. That was the theme, and they saw, hey, you're from Delta. How come you're not talking? So I didn't know. I didn't have a topic. So I'm like, okay. But this one's about, I think it was agile, from agile to product, right? And that's the theme on that. Basically, you're looking at just 3 days. The first day is this workshop. So you'll have Google talk about Apigee, for example. They bought Apigee years ago. So Apigee is the proxy API management platform. Maybe this time that WSO2 is a big player. API management space. Then you had Tick, and you had Kong, and there's like 50 vendors there explaining, how to do microservices and proxies and, so on and so forth. So it was pretty interesting. Even Smart Bear was there. They do, they're big in the Swagger Hub, the Swagger space as well. And Postman, they were there as well. Giving some demos of the new features and so on and so forth. So yeah, being industry tech and business conference APIs at the programmable economy and focuses on just like APIs. And so the theme for the Paris was basically legacy to agile from product ecosystem. So they did talk about, so they have different tracks, right? And so here's a few of the tracks. I mean, this thing's fairly large, right? And so I didn't, these are some of the ones I barely had time to get into because you're there sort of meeting people as well that you see in the space. So I had, some side conversations or, talk about roadmap and stuff, but essentially I was so I had a chance to talk. I submitted an abstract. Just basically saying, talking about how we at Delta, it's not so much about how we design APIs, but how we are getting or teaching teams and evangelizing APIs at Delta through the concept of a dojo. Right? You've heard of the dojo? I ask you because you're at Delta as well.
Yeah, I know the term, and we're not working like this in my space, but
okay. Yeah. So basically, the dojo is taken from Japanese culture. Like basically stands for like the place of the way. It's a place that's you're talking about time, place, and the people. It's a dedicated place for learning. Like very the key is immersive learning, right? And that's not, it's not just a one-off where like a meetup or a class or a course or offline learning that you actually take the whole team. If you have a huge organization, well, we've even had a huge org like Saul was there.
Yep.
They were 70. That was a huge challenge for me because there were 75 people split into 8-10 teams, and for 8 weeks you're constantly going with them, talking about basically the API life cycle. So Anako was there as well, doing dev practice and how do we test and contract and this. What do we do? Whether it's Spring Boot and this, and we're moving to OpenShift. I mean, we were like literally all over the place, but it's very, very, very focused. So the dojo went. That's basically we went for eight weeks. Now we're doing a lighter version of that, but again, it's very focused place, very immersive learning. You slow down a bit to learn, and that's always a challenge because you all have day-to-day activities. So we're looking for that trade-off. So I submitted the track. They said it looks interesting, and so I was in the large organization changes with API track, and so you have like your architecture, security, developer experience, docs and developer portal, testing. I think last year, I didn't see it in September, the state of GraphQL. So, you know, the whole day on just GraphQL, one track on that. State of API specification, cloud delivery, API governance, and API economy. So on the governance piece, I did attend a talk on how to implement the governance. So I'm in the team, the API COE team, Centers of Excellence, where we're doing the governance in our standards. Like, yeah, like for example, in your case, at your place in Manhattan, you know, if you're building APIs, I hope that you guys folks have a set of standards where APIs coming out of Manhattan will have a certain flavor, look, and feel, you know, and basically consistent and so on, you know, following certain best practice. So, you know, it's a style. So you folks have your style, even within the whole, say, Web APIs REST piece. This is a style. And there's a lot of room for differences, but they, you know, because of HTTP standards, there are some basics that you had to adhere to. You know, for example, you don't come up with your own status codes. That's stuff that's already there, right? But so anyway, they're talking about that and how to do developer the role of developer portals and, you know, enforcing, or not so much enforcing. I like to think of our team as sort of like API evangelists. You know, we don't want to be. I think that's a big no-no, being an API police. That just doesn't go anywhere. That doesn't work. I mean, I think the governance piece, nobody has the right answer, but, you know, definitely don't be, there's a certain degree of empathy you have to be able to, I think, manage it, understand what each team is going through. Like your team, for example, you're building APIs, what sort of constraints are you having, and you know, we'll kind of take it from there. Yeah, so API economy. So there are lots of cities. You know, there was several talks. I mean, I saw the documentation of several talks on how cities were actually leveraging more APIs. You know, transport, how to manage their public resources through APIs. Very, very interesting integrations. The state of GraphQL, they spoke about. I did a quarter of a day on that. I just wanted to get a sense of, being in the API COE space, I wanted to get a sense of, okay, for our company, what's the next thing, right? I know, so for example, I know we have some self-services. I think we've been doing that for a while, and we've learned from those and so on and so forth. And now we're like, okay, we're, you know, trying to accelerate, and it's, like you said, Jan, the APIs are easier to integrate, HTTP clients, and you're good to go. So while the standard is not that strict, like in SOAP, that's where some of the weirdness comes in, and the inconsistency of behavior. And that's where the governance really plays into it. It's not just, hey, here's a HTTP call, and sure, here's a URL, and good luck. You know, yeah, that's where you have problems. You know, that's where you run into problems. So looking at what's new. So interesting stuff there. GraphQL more in an ops perspective, because people think this is actually quite interesting. People think, oh, GraphQL is just like kind of BFF. It's just consumed by the front end, and that's it, right? Just query whatever data I want, and so on and so forth. But I saw some really cool examples where they were used in a pipeline. That gentleman was using, you curl GraphQL API, and use there's a tool called JQ, which is jQuery on, you know, the kind of like grep, but for JSON. And so you pass it a string, you know, a regex pattern, and you could pick the JSON output, and it makes a really powerful combination to a tool to build your pipeline. That's, you know, that's pretty cool stuff. So yeah, it's not just for interfaces, but also your general tooling overall. And then of course they went into you know, best practices using Apollo server. That's one a platform to build you know, GraphQL endpoints with a GraphQL server. There's Prisma, and then all kinds of clients, React clients as well. So anyway, there's lots of tooling. Anyway, a lot of conversation on tooling. So definitely there wasn't much of this versus that, but more like let's use it together. And I think I sort of like that mentality. I don't have to give up on REST, and because there were lots of good demos where they say, well, I'm building a bot using this, or I'm building this pipeline using that, and so on and so forth. So they're there. Now there are ways where GraphQL shines a little bit more than REST, and like n+1 problem where maybe you're overfetching or underfetching, that sort of thing. But if you come up we'll design RESTful API, I think we'll do the trick. You're not like that way out there saying it's totally off. So developer experience, that's pretty interesting. That one combined with API docs, there was a session talking about just how to properly document a README file, whether you're using GitHub Enterprise, GitHub On-Prem, or even GitLab On-Prem. There are lots of techniques to basically document a README. That is not make it bloated, that sort of thing. Some best practices around that. They spoke about lots of conversations around Markdown. You guys are familiar with Markdown syntax? You familiar? Basically, it's very. I can show that in a second. It's very, very lightweight. For example, GFM, GitHub delivered Markdown, so it's easy to read. It's not like you look underneath HTML. There's all these crazy angle tags and the other, but it's in its raw nature, it's fairly easy to read, and many tools render that very nice, very easy, HTML. Where I think we're playing Encore, you started deploying static pages.
Yep.
So there was some conversations on that as well. People using static pages to document this API. Especially another chat on the governance piece where another gentleman was saying, hey, they were using static pages to document this API, and maybe even have even a simple developer portal was a static page. That's how simple it was. So
the challenges of documenting with HTML is large. First of all, you need to be an HTML expert, and most of us who develop APIs are backend developers. We can do a little bit of HTML, but if we don't want to spend time aligning stuff together. So what you do is you write it in a markup, which is basically looks like regular text with a bit of syntax, so that it can structure it into tables and highlight it and all that kind of stuff. And then there are projects like Gitbook, Hugo, Hexo, who will take your static pages and they will convert it into HTML. And you can select themes that you want to see it in. I mean, you don't get too much flexibility, but at least you get a little bit of beauty in your documentation. And I think so that is more than enough for most of the developers. And I would go back. Sorry, what is that?
Well, that's a component space?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I used to hate documentation, and now I'm back in love with documentation again. I mean, I enjoy it. Really, you're laughing, but it's true. I used to laugh too. I hate it.
Yeah.
You know what? I started hating it because it was more like you're writing documentation for RFCs that page after page after page after page of documentation and playbooks that never work. Playbooks that never work. The moment it gives those to you, it's already behind by 2 sprints. So, that's why I hated that stuff. But with this it's easier, so I can keep up with it. I can keep up with the people who are consuming it, with the people who are developing, and so on and so forth. And there was also talk with continuous documentation. Yep. There was a gentleman who built a pipeline to continuously generate documentation. So it can be done. There's really no excuse other than to set aside some time, but it does pay. It definitely does pay dividends.
Right.
Continuous documentation said, well, documentation is Markdown. Markdown is a very simple format. You can just store it in any SCM. Then the pipeline possibilities are there. So why not do that? So they built that. I forgot what they were using, but I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, both GitHub and Git pages have got some automated stuff which generates your pages.
Yeah.
GitHub automatically does it. GitLab, you have to write a pipeline for it. But
yeah, but it's definitely not too bad. Not too bad. Maybe in the next one or another, when we get together next time, we can. I just had an idea. We can either mob. If you guys, I'll explain about mobbing programming here. We can mob on a pipeline for documentation in our next session, one of the meetups. So basically, mobbing is the same team. It's kind of like pair programming, but on steroids. Same team in the same space working on the same problem. So you can imagine all of us here, right? Let's build a pipeline for documentation. So we have a driver. I'm in front of the computer, and I'm driving. All I do is type. You people are the navigators. You directing me what to do, what command to run, what file to look at, what errors to check for, et cetera, et cetera. We were all doing that for 10-minute intervals. And it worked really well for us. We use that in the dojo as well. I mean, it's just an awesome productivity tool. And so I think I really like that approach. But yeah, so we could either build a pipeline in the meetup. I don't think people give demos, but they don't build stuff during demo.
I mean, there are hands-on meetups.
Hands-on
meetups.
Yeah.
We just have, since we do coaching for life, we can surely build something for an hour and a half session.
Yeah.
If that is what the audience likes. Would you like something like that?
I mean, I can put it on meetup.com and say, hey, let's build a pipeline. It continues the documentation pipeline. And off you go, you know? All right. Also, API security, of course, that's a big one. I saw there mainly, obviously, the usual OAuth. Let's practice it, okay, particularly if you have OAuth, but also OpenID Connect. That's, it keeps coming up, and I think we're going to adopt it soon. But I think OID is basically, just to put it simply, it's stacked on top of, it's basically based on OAuth, right? But the scopes, the identity scopes are standard. And so if you need user identity, you want to know what user is using your API, OpenID Connect is basically for you. You can do three-legged OAuth, but I think the OpenID Connect it standardizes on the scopes. And, you know, they went through a whole demo that, like, for example, maybe GitHub does is slightly different than some other companies, this or the other. That's where the problem starts. OpenID Connect is basically, I mean, if you're looking into a standard, or all like standards of securing APIs, I think that's the way to go. If you're doing two-legged, no changes. There's really no changes. So I think that's big in that space. Cloud delivery, a lot of talk about service meshes. You know, so you had your Kongs and their types and, you know, management platforms. And they were talking about, okay, they're running on top of Kubernetes. They use something Kubernetes. You know, is everything tied with Kubernetes? If you're in that space, you know, they're leveraging that platform. They want to make it seamless. Hey, if you have like you're moving to GCP, right? And so you have your workloads on Kubernetes, exposing those to Nginx or Kong or the other should be fairly straightforward. So they also throw in, I think, two types of service meshes. I thought Istio is one of them, and I forgot the name of a second one. But definitely take a look at Istio, and I'll put it in meetup.com when I remember the name. Yeah, so basically a lot of that service meshing, kind of like back in the early days of containers. I said, okay, I can build containers and the other. Now I got a service which made up of 30 containers. What do I do? And that's where the whole container war started. You had Mesos, which was practically dead. And then you have Docker, you know, you had Docker with Swarm to try to compete, you know, last couple of years with Kubernetes. And well, Kubernetes, I think, sort of won until the next big thing. So, anyway, that's there's a general theme, and those are the tracks. If you guys get a chance to go, I think it's well worth it. The next one's going to be in London in March. They want speakers. They want speakers. They want speakers. They want speakers. I used to think it's the first time I do something this big with that many people. I mean, I've done meetups and small time. ResFest is very, very intimate, very small, so you're not inhibited. But yeah, they definitely want speakers. They subjects and so on and so forth. I mean, they really, I'm sure we all have a story. Interesting to look at. It's just 20 minutes, 20-minute format with 5 minutes for questions, right? It sounds intimidating, but I've been submitting and they never got accepted, and finally got accepted. I kind of went, oh, wow, what do I do now? But I say, you know what? Let's do it. Once I got off stage, I'm like, okay, now that I've done one, I think I can do others. It's just, I talk too much, so they give you 20 minutes and someone's giving you a signal, then, I had to cut mine short a little bit because someone's going like this, 5 minutes.
Yeah, that happens with Miguel a lot.
Almost 5 minutes, they're going like this, 5 minutes. And I'm like, click, 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 click. So, the last one, real big. API Days, they have an initiative called Women in APIs. So they want more women speakers. You're up. So because of this problem, there's 4 men here, 1 woman. No, this is what they're talking about. So that's 20%. That's exactly the same numbers that we're quoting from the last September session, and now 22% Barcelona, 21% Paris. It's hard. So they definitely. So I attended the panel. So they have a lunch panel of women in tech and APIs. They had representation from Microsoft was there, Postman, a few other companies there, and yeah, they were explaining some of the nuances, some of the problems, and I think at Delta, I think we do a fairly good job with the speaker series, right? And I think I'm going to bring that up. Like, for example, the dojo, we have give or take 10 or 8 coaches, and only 2 in 2 years have been women. So we could definitely do better. These are very, very sharp women out there, and definitely, this resonates with me. So, I have 2 daughters, and one of them is I've been influenced, and then now that we're past the influence, she wants to study computer science, IT, but now we're arguing tech. Now we're arguing about getting your room clean. Now we're arguing about technology, and this works and that works. I just got out of a presentation. She did, talking about microservices. I'm going, what? As an adult, I did that, but she started doing, in fact, the companies around here, basically Node.js, she wrote a Node.js microservice that feeds messages to RabbitMQ, which feeds it to Elasticsearch. I'm like, okay, wow, that's a lot of components, So anyway, we need more stuff like that, So anyway, so that they're big on that, and Valerie, you should try, or tell your friends, or even in Manhattan, go out there and tell female colleagues, hey, they're definitely interested on.
Get people interested into coming up for meetups like this. So this is the grassroots level at which we can build a movement, and we can have more women involved in this meetup. Those women will go to API Days, and those women will go and do something great in APIs.
Yeah, it's true. The people that were there were giving solutions. So we have a speaker series, right? And then they have mentorship programs and so on and so forth, and even maternity leave. So you just don't have to sacrifice your career because you have children, so on and so forth. And both for man and woman, right? To be equal. But I think to Ankur's point, I think I don't know how to fix it other than getting started early. Just start early. Start with the conversation and just showing, what we do, and maybe spark some interest, and take it from there. I don't know how else to do it, but you got to start early to break that cycle, and then start showing up at the meetups and so on and so forth. Even thought about going to PostCon, taking my daughter to PostCon and say, look, this is what happens in a conference. This is what it might look like. I think they do a fairly good job. And this is what you're going to be exposed to. And I think the sooner the better.
Right.
You know?
I mean, you're right. It is, now I think about it, all the meetups that I go to, it is 1:5 ratio.
Yeah. That's bad. We have to do better. So I'm doing my part, and we can do our part in this, and hopefully improve that. So yeah. So that's so I'll go ahead and share all those details at meetup.com, and that's API days. Let's see here. Now next topic we're gonna talk about. Let's see, design first, and then we'll dive into a quick little demo. Now, just a heads up. So when I started communicating with the folks at APIOPS, they gave me a presentation how to run a community. They're really good at that stuff. They said they would help and so on and so forth. But they also mentioned that, and I think it makes sense to keep things vendor neutral. Mm-hmm. So we're building. Hopefully, we're building pipelines and so on and so on. So we'll from time to time talk about, okay, you're using this tool, and maybe you're going to use this tool, and Jan over there uses whatever tool. Of course, we use tools like, say, Postman and Swagger Hub to maintain our design, but not let's not make it. It's not designed. This is not designed to be a vendor pitch. So just want to make clear to you guys, folks, that we're not here to tell you anything. But this is these are the tools that we use, and it works for us, so on and so forth. So let's see here. So this is, I'm borrowing some slides from a colleague of mine where we had another earlier presentation. So we're talking basically he talked about the outside.
Full screen.
Oh, yeah.
I can say F11 should work.
Which one? F11?
No. Yeah. Good. No. Go to view and go to full screen.
Full screen. Sorry. Yeah. So anyway, So sorry. He talked about outside-in architecture and things from a customer's perspective. In particular, a particular point there is basically a lot of times we, and I'm guilty of it, say, okay, we're going to build an API, or say if it's not an API first scenario where we have a platform already in place, and we're building APIs as a sidecar, so we have to expose some data, so we have to build an API. So there's a lot of that. I mean, I started out that way as well. Many of my projects did not start as an API first-class citizen, right? You're building that platform from APIs themselves. And so you lose sight of the fact that you just want to move data from A to B and just pure data, not thinking of, say, for example, functionality as well. What's the intent of the API? What's the goal of the API? What sort of business value does it have? Kind of like if you want to use an API just to move data from A to B, that's kind of like going to what's the pasta place? What's that called? Where they have breadsticks. What's that called?
Olive Garden.
Huh?
Olive Garden.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Valerie. So basically, to think of APIs just move data, it's kind of like going to Olive Garden and only ordering breadsticks. Pretty much that's it. Really, to me, I mean, I think it really means that, right? So there's obviously more to it, and so in my design work, I'm constantly stressing that. Hey, what's the business value? What's the business value? What's the value add? What are the goals? What's the intent, right? And so that we use design first to drive that mentality, that behavior. There's, of course, there's out there industry. There's code first versus design first. So at Delta, our standard is design first. We sort of get all the stakeholders together as possible and go over the use cases, and then go into, say, for example, look at since we're dealing with REST and we're talking about resources, what sort of resource model do we have? And then what are we going to expose? What does that look like, right? Your question earlier about, Jan, about, do we expose data through whether it's text or only JSON? Well, it could be anything really. It could be a JPEG image or sound file. Who knows, right? It depends on the mindset. So, resource complexity methods, API objects, API documentation. So that's basically with those 4 themes, we're trying to cover all of that within using the to meet our needs in all those areas. In particular, basically the documentation, the API objects, the API spec. Now, this is a little bit old, so we noticed we're using Swagger. You guys familiar with Swagger? No? Okay, so basically, Swagger is a
open API.
Swagger formerly, so now the newer version is called Open API Specification, OAS 3. It was formerly called Swagger. So when you see over here the version 2.0, that basically let's talk about Swagger. So essentially, it's a domain description language that's basically language agnostic to describe your APIs. Right? So there's nothing, the language agnostic part is very, very important. So there's nothing, like in this particular example, it's kind of small, but there's nothing there that says you're working with a particular stack, right? Let's see. So there you go. So that's a bigger example. So for example, so this is the general structure for OpenAPI 3. They've gotten rid of some of these, and they use, for example, components. There's a big block here called components, and so they buried this inside of components, and they've got rid of produces, consume. They expanded on base path. So, for example, right now you can only say base path, and you say, hey, passenger API, etc. /v1, and with the host, right? Now they expanded this and made this an array. Right, it's a 3D spec. So you could include your development endpoint if you have one. If you have a pipeline, you're pushing to your development endpoint host, and then of course you can list your upper environment, stage, SI, and even production. This way, this is cool. This is very important, nice feature, because you'll see in a moment you can use the try button on the actual Swagger UI. It takes this, generates the UI, and then adds a try button in there, so you can actually pick whichever server, and off you go. If you have the tokens and so forth, yeah, you'll be able to work. So this is admittedly, we're still, many of our APIs are still described this way. This is almost 6 years old now. And so for example, if you're starting with APIs, I would recommend the Open API Spec 3x. If you could describe, for example, it's easier to describe like webhooks, callbacks, so on and so forth. We haven't even tried it out well. I haven't been that successful maybe describing hypermedia APIs with OAS 3. So anyway, this is how we describe our API. So like I said, you can see here, for example, here's an HTTP GET, right? We know that one. And there's nothing, and here's the response. Okay, status 200. And in this case, okay, we just say okay, right? We're just describing what that is. There's no payload description. Let's say produces application. To your point, you can say application / you can say text, or whichever. There's about hundreds of line types. So whichever your API supports, so like XML would be XML, and that would be it. So there's no language. There's nothing here that says, and so there's no language, right? So at the center of it all, so you have this contract, which of course this is YAML, which is a superset of JSON. And I like YAML format because it's easier to read, right? Rather than, I like JSON. I love JSON, but reading JSON doesn't have APIs. Sometimes it hurts my head. So you'll have with this, there's enough tooling around the Open API spec as well, where you can actually go just as fast as you go going straight from code. I know what I need. Okay, here's the requirement. Let me go fire up Spring Initializer, get a bunch of controllers, and then pass a bunch of parameters and connect it to my backend and here's my API. You can generate service stuff from this, like this automatic. I'll demo that, and you can generate clients from this. So the thought process, the idea is basically think about the use cases and describe them here before you go straight to code. And so that's how that's our approach on API design. So, and then we use there's a vendor called SmartBear, and we use Swagger Hub. They have a SaaS product as well. So if you go, it's free. If you go to, I'll show that in a second. It's free for one user, and you can use many of the features. But the moment you start, say you want to add collaborators to work together in the design, you can't. You have to go to a paid plan, right? But so we have this on-prem, right? It runs on a VM with underneath that, I think, is a bunch of Docker containers. And this is where we store our designs. And so right now we're a little over 1,600 designs. That's every unique design with every version, right? And support both so anyway, you'll see a lot of, I said Swagger, right? You'll see OES 2 and Swagger using, with this number. And of course the 3X. When you see 3X, immediately know that's OAS. Yeah, so again, we need to follow the principles of the design first. And it has many innovations. Right now, many teams are not, I don't think there's that many innovations. Some of them might be using the one with Git, which is fairly cool. When you save it, it'll actually send it to Git, it'll generate an SDK. Well, it depends on the innovation. Just send the YAML and saves it at GitLab or GitHub or an SDK. If you use the SaaS product, you have to be careful because, for example, at your shop, if everything's on the cloud, then the SaaS product might work because then you have to make sure that you use GitHub. So GitHub on the cloud, public GitHub, and public Swagger Hub, that would work. But the other way would not work if you have on-prem to the outside of that would work. I believe we haven't priced it, but it's available. We actually, speaking of APIOps, we put together by Google. So again, this is really, really important. Allows code gen to help generate client and server-side code stuff. I think it's more than stuff, and this is where we struggle, at Delta, because as developers, we want to go, I'm really good at what I do, and I think I understand it, and go off to the races and build and start coding an API. Problem is you might get requirements wrong. You might build something, might be put together great pipeline, all that, but it might not serve the needs of your customer. It happens where, here's what I have. Let's say a user story, which is of course translated perhaps by someone else, maybe a business analyst or product owner, hopefully a product owner, right? And so that there's some lots of translation. You go out and code it, and then I come in and say, well, let's take a look at your API. Have you considered this? Well, no, I don't want to change it because of the, I've already coded it and so on and so forth. So it's always a problem. Sometimes I have a hard time convincing engineers that, if you put some thought in your design, you can go just as fast because with a click and with automation someday, I know of course looking at me, you can generate an SDK right off the bat. Just push it out to GitLab, which triggers a job in Jenkins and says, okay, I'm going to generate SDKs and then push those to, say, maybe Nexus and so on and so forth. And so, yes, I think it's definitely doable. It's possible. So it's more so it does stuff. So, for example, if you want to mock, you can actually track up, you can actually mock without writing a single line of code. Mocks are great because you can develop in parallel. You send it off to your UI team over here, and you're touching it, right? Getting a quick feedback loop going. Anyone who's exploring the API or building a UI from your API can actually see what's actually happening, and it's fairly quick. It works well without writing a single line of code. You can generate a service stub to do that if you wanted to. And once you have the service stub, say for example, you can push it to a branch. Here's the development branch. Then you don't want to override. Once you have real code here, you don't want to override it. So you keep touching the API, sending it, it keeps pushing it to GitLab, generates new controllers, for example, and your data model, and then you basically with an MR or pull request, you basically bring that over, so you don't override it. That's always this trouble. Hey, I'm going to write a different stuff. I'm going to overwrite my subarray. You don't. Send to a separate branch, get a Git workflow going, and through a PR process, just bring in the code that was newly generated. So, any questions? You guys have some use of any designs out there in your team?
So we definitely use REST API. We tried to do the Swagger contract before we started to develop. Not do any building integration with Git or. But the thing is that our design right now is we work directly with Teradata, so we have a client that is in Angular, and we have the API layer, and then in the backend we have Teradata, and we don't have anything in between. So the client goes directly to Teradata. Also for searches, autocomplete.
Yeah, but this is the design of the API. What interface you are exposing?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what your implementation is. I mean,
Sure. Yeah, I know. The reason I'm saying it is because I know that sometimes when you have some kind of like I don't know much about GraphQL, but if you can talk about it more in the way of kind of like where the elements are being saved, that's like in your JVM. Or it's a document-based. It's a document-based database.
Well, it depends. Say, for example,
so which elements are you talking about?
Yeah, GraphQL. Like, for example, if I want to save a session ID, like some kind of like ID from the client, I don't want to save it in the Teradata. I don't want to save it on the
Session, I would probably just save it in the cache.
yeah.
Because that you want to expire the session eventually. You don't want to write it into a database because the database call could itself be very expensive to make.
So what about search? Search over if you have. Sorry, I'm like really talking about something very, very.
No, that's good.
No, that's right.
If I want to search over, I don't know, like every autocomplete, will it go directly to Teradata, or do I want to have some kind of layer in between?
That depends on how often are you writing to it, and I mean, are you reusing it after you're writing it?
No, it's an API dedicated only for one component, the UI.
Okay.
So basically, it's like a specific VFF. So
yeah.
So if it's a VFF just for that use case, in other words, the autocomplete.
Sure.
Yeah. So maybe there's some caching situation involved as well. But again, if you're saying okay, you could design a VFF.
Yeah.
And say, hey, talking about pagination and the other, thinking of what's that use case. We want to use this VFF in all of our look ahead, lookups and then UI perspective. Then that's the way that you can put it. There's nothing stopping you. And guess what? Then you can pick. There's about 30 something odd languages. Well, it'll generate something fairly decent. And then you can take a look. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I do start with a design, but then I manually code it if it's something fairly small, because I want to pick whatever libraries I want to pick. Right. If you're using the Swagger code gen tool, it'll pick HTTP clients for you and so on and so forth. So you might not, I mean, it's maybe not worth the effort to say, well, here's a SDK. You don't like the library for whatever reason, and then to swap that out might be a headache.
You might be able to configure that.
Possibly. I have to check.
I've done that. I've generated just a model from this, and then have my own controllers and services written.
Yeah,
and interfaces written and all that kind of.
Yeah, maybe just take the model and.
Right. So you can select what you want to do. You only want to generate the model. That takes care of majority of the stuff, right? And then you want to write your interfaces in your own way, because if you generate it from Swagger's, it might give you generic classes which you might not want to use.
Yeah. What I did notice, like in the specific feature that we're developing right now, that we started with the Swagger contract, I think it's changed a lot. So we all the time update the spec YAML, but how do you come to like? So we come with some kind of a contract, so the UI can start development, you can start your development.
Right.
But
that is exactly what he was talking about.
Yeah.
What you do is you generate. You always point to the endpoint of the spec, and your application can auto-generate the stubs. So you don't really care about how will it happen. It's just every time you build it, it generates a new spec for you.
And also, I have a question. Is the UI, like a lot of the UI developers are complaining that they don't want to work with a mock JSON. Is there any way from the Swagger to create, I mean, it will be also a mock, I guess, but something that is more real than just kind of like a JSON?
So you can use service virtualization. Yeah. There are various different.
Like an Overfly or like something like what's it called? Mock, JMock? Not JMock. Service virtualization, you mean like?
Yeah, just talk to the QA team, and they will have knowledge about how to set up a service virtualization for you.
Yeah.
That becomes a little bit much better. It is a better mocking. Yeah. But again, you need to decide when do you need what kind of mocks to test your application. And each application should have their own testing strategy.
Right.
So depending on that, you might want to use different tools. Just a JSON mock works perfectly fine for a unit level coding.
Right.
But for integration level coding, you might want to use service virtualization.
Yeah. I use the tool Overfly. It was a good experience there.
Okay.
I forgot the second one. You guys are probably know.
Yeah, I mean, I ran into this thing in one of my projects before I got to Delta. I ran into that. So I had a design, generated a server stub, just so I could, we weren't using Swagger Hub, so I had to generate a server stub and then deploy it, but I constantly had to change it because developers are saying, well, okay, I have this payload. I want another value and another value and another value. Like, it's not built for that, right? It's just get you quickly going to the interface, just to quickly go. Now, if you want to service virtualization, it's because you want, I think the gap is you want to start service virtualization because you're not ready, the back is not ready, but you still want to start doing some more serious testing. I don't see any other reason. I mean, you want to be able to, the payload's the payload, especially in the RESTful model, it's fixed.
Yeah.
It's pretty fixed. Yeah. So, so then I'm like, okay, well, then why are they, because they wanted to go further and then the backend wasn't available.
Right.
That gap of more real, I think that's what that's for. But, yeah, so, don't lose faith. I think it's definitely doable. So let me see. Let's get into that. Let me get into a quick little demo. I'll show you what that looks like from our end. Let's see here. see, let's try this one. No, that's a little portal. No. And here we go. So this is our on-prem solution, and again. There you go. So, for example, here you have the several organizations, but on the SaaS product, no, that's the, so this is the open source editor, right? And this will basically get you, so what they've done, they've taken the code gen and the open source editor, and they wrapped it up in a little bit of a workflow. Yeah. Minimal workflow. You know, you update, you can add some comments and so forth. So then you get notifications. This sends a lot of emails. You know, I replied to, you made a comment, I saw that, I replied to one of your comments and so on. So that people are sort of complain about that. It's very chatty that you can turn that off. There's ways to turn that off.
That is, ChatOps is the way to go now. Yes.
No, true, exactly. So that's a good point. So again, you'll see, so basically, yeah, this is an ubiquitous pet store. You know, this is I don't know anybody, a lot of people start learning REST. And honestly, this is not some hardcore people in the API space. They say this is not a RESTful API. But for the sake of, you know, for the sake of conversation, I always, you know, the mandatory quote, RESTful API, right? But yeah, everyone starts learning this stuff. So you can see here, like, okay, you're doing a pet. So you have the, you know, you divide this into the resources, right? Your pet resource and your store resource and your user resource. And then now you're getting to, well, maybe you could maybe come up with a sort of, start thinking of microservices. You say, okay, maybe this will be its own microservice, right? It just does pests, and then you'll have your own store microservice and maybe your user microservice, and totally separate as opposed to, there's nothing stopping you from doing this in a single API. But you got to wonder sometimes, you know, maybe what is that bounded context? You know, you know, if you want to make it, say, more, and that's always debatable, more usable and so on and so forth. So some will go, well, why do I just need the store piece, so, you know, break it off, and that's where that conversation starts. But you can see here, you know, some of that structure, right? For example, here. So, and then of course you could navigate to, this is funny, and then it'll navigate to here to your post, right? So here's remember the structure I was talking about, the past, and then you have post, the post HTTP verb, the operation ID. That's important. That's basically your controller ends up being called that name, you know. And you got your producers, consumes, code gen tools. Here's the tricky part. The code consumes and produces. When you use code gen, it sees this. It says, okay, it will automatically generate code to introduce the first header. This guy, this is an array. It'll pick the first one as a default when it sets up a header in your SDK, right? But it'll include code so you can actually check it as well. But that's something. I always put JSON first because our standard default is basically JSON, right? Or if you work more with XML, you can flip that, no problem. But there you go. There's nothing code about this, right? And so they've taken this and they added that to the on-prem solution. So
there is two formats, right? One is JSON, one is YAML.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, this is kind of confusing. Some developers, they're developing their, like, the text from here, and then they copy paste, and they put it as a YAML. And some people set it as a JSON, and then like in the Git, you always like 3 different versions. That's
because every time, because because every time you want to do, let me see if I can do this here.
You can generate it.
Like you could generate it, but check this out. If I say, let me go back here. If I say editor, because here's a problem, not a problem, but I think it always wants to,
I think there was a parameter at top which changes it from JSON to HTML, JSON to YAML and YAML to JSON.
yeah, I know it can, but to his point though, is that if you try to, I'll bring this up, if you try, let's say, copy paste, it will, well, it gave me an error here, but usually what it'll try to do is, typically what it'll try to do is, let's say, for example, file, I don't know, let's say, yeah, you can convert it as JSON, all of that. Yeah. But what happens is, let's say if I did this, paste. Well, it's not working now, but I know that usually what it tries to do is says, hey, you want to convert it? I'm sorry, I have it backwards. If you have JSON and you want to paste it here, it'll say, hey, it's JSON, you want to convert it to YAML. And it ends up winning because people get so annoyed. So they say, okay, fine. I'll just hit a YAML. I don't want to see that prompt anymore. And so they keep using YAML. I like reading YAML, but it does support it. It does support it. So, you know, so anyway, let me go back to this. So for example, here's one of our, let me see, do I have, maybe I did the, let me see. Okay, so here's an example. Here's like, this is one of our APIs. You'll see here that there's a comment section, right? And so that's the interesting part where so it doesn't support simultaneous editing, right? So say, for example, let's say you pick someone's working on this and say, you could say something like this. Hey, I think we need to support a new line. I'll say support XML. Right? And then you put your comment here. And then someone comes back and says, hey, what is the MIME type? You know, and so you go on and go on and go on like that, and someone replies, say, oh yeah, it's application XML, reply, and then we close it. Okay, then someone comes here and says, okay, now I'm going to basically add the MIME type, and okay, you save it. It tells you here the number of open comments you have. You resolve it, and now you're, let's see, what's wrong with this mouse? You resolve it, now you're down to 1. So that's basically back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, you know, offshore, onshore. That's exactly, you know, the question.
Yeah, I have a question, like, how do you fit it in the, I mean, I know it's not a tech question, but how do you fit it in the Scrum, Agile model? Like, what part do you do this contract? You do it in the, like, we don't really have a design. We just, you know, we have.
That is a very good question.
Yeah,
I mean,
an excellent question.
The thing is, you do not create the whole design at once. In an agile model, what you're doing is you have a requirement. I need to, what is this? Model runs. Okay, run the model. So you created one endpoint, which is one resource, which is model runs.
Sure.
And then you start developing on it. Then when you have a next story to do something else, let's say present a forecast, then you create the story for that. You start working on it. You write the design for it. You code for it, test it.
Before the story.
Right. So you only do it if your story needs it. You do not go first and design the whole thing at once.
I mean, that's an excellent point because I'll give an example. I'll give a real life world example. Payments team. They were under the impression that smart people, good people, I mean, it's just, you know, we have our nuances and biases and, you know, it is what it is, right? But they were under the impression that I think it's that, for example, to be agile, they say, you know what, like he was saying, let's build the whole thing. And that's hard because I was like, wow, I mean, you have to make an API or, you know, even an API like this, you know, this is the weather API. let's come up with all the use cases. Let's all really put some thought into this, because it's not just throwing this endpoint here, resource here, and calling it a day. I mean, you have to look at the whole API holistically. Does it make sense? And that's hard to say for the whole thing. So the thought was, let's do it together, and then we'll deploy with the same contract. We'll deploy just these two resources. And then we're ready for the next iteration because we're agile, right? We're changing, we're going fast. We'll do these, we'll do forecasts. Yep. And I told them, no, you don't, like he was saying, right? You don't have to do that. Just planning your sprint. Sprint 1, sprint 0 could be ideation. Just think about what you're building. Simple yet at heart. Think about what you're building. Maybe the latter half of the sprint, the 2-week sprint, start, say, putting a specification together and build, say, these two resources because it makes sense. You have something solid that makes sense based on your problem, your value add, and so on and so forth. Then sprint 1, then next sprint, with a click of a button, or you could generate code against it. Right. And then you deploy it. Yeah. Anyway. And and so basically you keep going, and then you go fast, OpenShift, whatever, you deploy this, and you're done, and then you keep going. Oh, next sprint, think about it, think about resources, and then do this, and then you cover airports and so on. Because otherwise, here's the problem, otherwise you deploy this API with these two endpoints, live endpoints, and then I look at your contract and say, well, what happened to this?
You would want to try to hit it, and it might just blow up your entire service. So the idea with Agile is that you need to be done. And you cannot be done with incomplete work.
Yeah.
People forget that when they convert from waterfall to Agile.
Yeah, no, for sure. We usually, the flow for us is like we have the UI mock, then we have the story, but this part is kind of like, let's just do that. And I think that's the best way to do it. I mean, to go with the UI mock with this an iteration before, to do some kind of a research, and then the iteration after you start to develop. That's like better practice.
Because it's a double-edged sword. I think your colleagues are saying that because it's documentation. Documentation. Someone goes to code, let's get it done. Right? You're under pressure, you need to get it done. But at the same time, documentation is good.
It can take some time, I think, if you're doing it this way, because if you're starting with the API and afterwards you completed the spec YAML, eventually you'll have to do this work.
There's people who were doing it backwards.
Yeah.
They were actually doing it backwards, and they completely missed the point. Is you start with, if you respect the contract. There's a gentleman by the name of Arnaud Laurent. They call him the API handyman. You can Google him. He has a term that I like to use called API fastness. You can go. He claims, and I believe him. You can go as fast by going through this model. You can just go just as fast. Yeah. You really can. Yeah. And then you avoid a lot of your pain. So, just want to show you something real quick. So this one, for example, this particular feature, of course, here's your here's your documentation. You want to share with your product owners or your consumers, so on and so forth. Here you go. This is the way to do it. You have, I don't think this is a try button. No, this is documentation, so it doesn't even have a try.
No, there isn't. Try it.
Oh, yeah, there is. Sorry.
There's always try it.
So, expand this.
The UI thing is just like, like you always click on the tryout in order to see like the field.
So, so for example, here you go. So try out, right? And again, this, this is really cool when you actually specify an array, because then you can start saying, I don't know, ATL, and that's actually quite nice. It's rendered from the UI, and hit execute with my complaint.
So in a way, Swagger will imitate a browser for me, right? Like
a curl command. It will imitate a curl command.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's generally the core. Okay.
Let me see.
And it will tell you exactly what curl command it executed.
Yeah, in the bottom.
Missing a transaction ID. 1, 2, 3. It's complaining. Let me try that again. So it's trying. There you go. It tried to execute something, and it 4.1, whatever. Actually, that worked. It's actually going to our lower environment proxy, which is this, and basically say, hey, you're not authorized. But there it is. You know, you could basically try it.
Right.
And you want to share this with another developer, someone who wants to explore it, copy paste the curl command,
Yeah.
send it to them, you're good to go. And all of this from that. So,
Right.
and you know, that doesn't get any easier than that. Let me see, here's the other cool thing.
So could be an option that the browser needs to do more work besides to use the curl command or the Swagger? I'll give you an example. Like I mean, right now, I wrote an API that's returning CSV, a file.
Mm-hmm.
So what I see in the example is the browser needs to pass in a header like a content type.
Yes.
Yeah.
String.
Yes.
But if you go to Swagger, you don't need that. Like
Right, it does the curl command for you, right? So get commands are very easy. It's like you can type it in the browser and it will work fine. It's the post commands and put commands and all those kind of stuff, which needs a request body and all that stuff.
Right.
That might be difficult in the browser.
Yeah, the browser is the problem. So try it here. But to go further, let's take one of your APIs. Do you have a sandbox? Do you have 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes. So basically, you don't have a sandbox, so it's hard to try. If you go to a developer portal, Best Buy, said all these companies, the onboarding, they do have a sandbox environment where you can create. You can actually, that's dangerous. They usually typically don't let you create stuff, resources on the other end, but that's definitely possible. So internally, that might be a use case. So just real quick before we finish, so here we go. So I have this, and I'm going to generate, okay, so pick a language. You got Golang, Java, I think they even added TypeScript.
Let's go Python.
Let's go Python. Let's do Python. Let's go Python. So I think the Kotlin and Python. Here we go. And let's do Python. And there it is. And this is our Python client.
Should that generate the client or the server?
That's a client. This is a client.
Oh.
So I'll
you can do both.
You can do both. So I'll show you something here.
Just double click it will open up. You don't need to extract that.
Let me see. No, but I wanted to open it through VS Code so you could actually see.
Okay.
Just a normal use case. You'll fire it up with your IDE. See. Okay. And then let me find that directory.
Click on date modified.
What?
Date modified. All you have to do is.
Oh, date modified. You're right. Absolutely right. Date modified. Ooh, get rid of this. What do I do? Sorry, this is struggling with.
Where did you extract it?
No, here on the downloads, but looking, I want directories first. Way at the top. Okay. Python Meetup. Okay, so let me open that with the opening code. And there you go. Here's a README. And I mean, look at that. Look how much documentation you get right out of the box. You get a talks file, which is kind of like your make sort of maiden-ish,
right?
You know, because you have your depths, right? So say
This is your unit test.
Right, and you can do unit test errors as well. And you see the environment list. So it's saying I'm going to recreate the environment for Python 2.7 or Python 3. You can add more environments that will actually replicate every environment for that. So here you go. Here's your, of course, this is basically your, starter client, and is your. I mean, look how much code you're getting. I mean, it's just if you want to do a stub, same thing. Go back here, export, and do server stuff, and then I'm going to do, you know what? I'll do Spring. This is just documentation, pure documentation, server stuff. Let me do Spring. And yeah, basically. bring it
Stand
in.
right there. Yeah.
Yeah, this one, so open that with code. I mean, you get a lot. Here's your good old POM file. So here's what I'm talking about earlier, right? This is a bit old actually. The version of Spring, you can go, right, okay, so tweak it to 2.7. There's what he was talking about earlier on. There's some code gen options you can change, so you can say target 1.8 right out of the bat, but I can actually build this right now, not an issue. And let's see, here's your, I mean, it's pretty much here's your model, etc. So, I mean, here's your. Funny that it imports stuff. Yeah. Redundant. Yeah, so you can change.
So that is just the way that generator is written.
Right, so pretty much, I mean, just add your real code over here.
I think that it also assumes that you will use the validator and path variable and all that.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. I mean, you need annotation.
Right.
Yeah, so. Ta-da.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, it's worth definitely very cool. Definitely look at it. So, in your space, hang in there. If you have doubts, send them our way, and I'm on a mission. I will go there and prove to them that I think they can go very close to fast. They can go fast with this stuff.
Yeah, sure. I'm a big supporter. Very good.
So we need to get out of here at 8 by 8.
Cool. Yeah.
So when do we want to have the next meetup? Does the
Probably,
time and the day work for people? What is it today, Monday?
6 to 8 work.
6 to 8, 6:30 to 8.
Well, can we? Well, even earlier?
No, that would be difficult.
That might be a little
We
tricky.
have to come from there.
Yeah, I forgot about that. That's good.
Yeah. So and usually people work till 5:30, depending on company to company. So usually 6:30 works for most of the meetups. Sometimes even 7. So if you guys, since you guys are the pioneers here, if 6 works for you, 6:30 works for you, we can have.
Let me do a little. You guys get in there like a little bit here, so I'll put it on the.
Yeah, and let's go back to the API ops and we can take a picture.
But yeah, I want to do us. Right?
Oh, group 1. Yeah.
Group selfie. Group selfie, is it better like now? Yeah, that's cool. I think you're in the right spot. But I'll do you guys.
I can do the selfie. Sure.
I'll try a couple.
Do panoramic.